It wasn't the songs I sang. It wasn't the stories I shared. It was just the fact that I was broken and I got up there and I did it anyway. That's what ministered to people. That's what accomplished something, And that was the beginning of me understanding that God wanted to use me, not in spite of my weaknesses, but because of them.
Welcome to What We Really Want, conversations about connection. Settle in and get ready for a great conversation. Let's talk about what we really want.
So I am with my buddy, Andy Gullahorn.
What's up?
And we're going to talk about his buddy, Jason Gray. I feel like it was just moments ago that we were talking and having an episode with you.
I wonder if it feels that way because it was.
Yeah, it was. I mean, mere seconds ago.
Okay.
Who knows how long has transpired?
Yeah, so much time has gone by.
Isn't it weird how time works?
Just time traveled. Literally.
So you have known Jason Gray for a very long time, have written a lot of songs with him. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how you got to know him, and you guys go way back.
Yeah, we do go way back. I don't remember. All I remember about the first time that we met is that he was in Nashville for a GMA conference, and we met at Atlanta Bread Company. I just remember liking him. He's just a really likable guy. And we started writing together not long after that. I think one of the first couple of songs we wrote together is the one that you kind of initially reached out to me about for
why you brought me here.
Yeah, these Roots retreats to come play. I could list so many songs I've written with Jason that just mean a lot to me. I write a lot of songs with other people, and not all of those do I feel like I can put on my own record as my own artist voice. Mm-hmm. I've probably had more songs I've written with Jason that I could do that with, and he's recorded a number of songs as well. Mm-hmm. But some of that is like our conversations sitting down. He likes to go deep.
As do you.
I think I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And Jason is really, really smart, as I am not. So, yeah, we've just shared a lot of life together and kind of walked through different seasons pretty vulnerably. Yeah, he's always bringing something. Those conversations always turn into some song that is meaningful and deep. Mm-hmm. Some of my favorites is, Why You Brought Me Here is one that I use a lot. Winning Streak. Another one that I really love. We wrote a Christmas song together called I Will Find a Way, which is one of my favorite songs to be a part of. But yeah, he's just been a good friend over the years, and I love writing songs with him.
Well, one of the ones that you two wrote together that is really heavy, and both of you have recorded it, is Death Without a Funeral.
Yeah.
There's no stone to lay the flowers down beside. No mention in the paper, though something clearly died. No gathering for family and friends to eulogize. It's a death without a funeral.
For years, we would get together and share life and talk about stuff and write songs. And there were a lot of songs that we wrote about like a hard time in a marriage, writing aspirationally like hope for marriage working out. And then the marriage didn't work out. So, here we were after writing all these songs about trying to make something work, talking about what is it like on this side of it when it's over. He was just really vulnerable. And that's one of the things that I love about Jason is that he just brings his whole self to those songs and is willing to kind of like put himself in the seat of examination and talk about what's really going on. And that song, people have reached out about that song going through all kinds of things. I mean, going through divorce, but there's a million ways that something can essentially die, that you don't get a chance to grieve it. Just a small example of the way of him opening up his own story is hopefully healing for other people who are going through things.
People who have been aware of Jason and followed him and his music for a while, you'll get to know that this is a man who has been pretty familiar with suffering. Mm-hmm. He's grown up with a speech impediment. He has a stutter that he is real open to talk about. And then, of course, the experience with his marriage ending. And then even right now, he's got a son who's going through a major health event. And so it just seems like one thing after another. I mean, what have you noticed in him, just in how he's walked through that stuff, his resilience, his willingness to grieve?
I just see someone who's really brave. Someone who wants to take a good, hard look at himself and is chasing after healing. And he's willing to go there. And I'm always grateful for it.
There are few people, and you're one of them, but there are few people who write songs that are that genuine. And I can't wait to talk about his music and his life. And I appreciate you taking some time to talk well about your friend.
Well, I love him.
Well, I love you.
I love you.
And we're done. But we are most definitely not done with our episode with Jason Gray. In fact, it's just getting started. Thank you, Andy, for helping us to set that up. Folks, I can't wait for you to hear this episode. It was a lengthy conversation Jason and I had. We actually talked for almost 2 hours. I have trimmed it down to a little over 1 hour, and I hope that you'll stay all the way through. In fact, that's why one of the reasons why we called this episode A Conversation Worth Staying For. We ran the gamut on topics. We talked about songwriting, friendship, having gone through abandonment, physical struggles like stuttering, going through divorce, having a child with leukemia, and just even examining the concept of what we do when we are functioning in our shadow self. It's crazy. If it was there to talk about, we talked about it. Jason is a fascinating man. He has been a singer-songwriter for more than 20 years. You can get his music anywhere you stream it. Something new that Jason can add to his list of accomplishments is being an author. He has a book coming out shortly. It's called Words and Music by Jason Gray, Devotional Essays and Stories from a Life in Songs. The other reason we called the episode A Conversation Worth Staying For is Worth Staying For is the title of a song Jason released a few years ago that is autobiographical. It tells the stories of when he was abandoned by his dad as a small child, the pain of going through a divorce. We'll play a clip from that song. If you haven't already been introduced to his music, go check it out. This is episode 69 with our guest, Jason Gray. It's called A Conversation Worth Staying For. And that conversation starts right now.
I think you might have the wrong email address. You sent it to, and he's a guy in Canada who does Irish orchestral music.
Well, if he joins, we can apologize in person. So that would be kind of fun.
I always wanted to hire him to do some like orchestral arrangements.
Yeah.
So that it could say orchestral arrangements by Jason Gray.
And you'd sound even more multi-talented.
Yeah. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I guess last time was standing around the fire.
Andy Gullahorn's birthday. What a meaningful life he's created.
Yeah. I was with him a couple of weekends ago, and we were talking about it. And, obviously he's just like, shrugging his shoulders. But 130 people don't show up for your birthday party if you're a jerk.
No. That's the biggest part of it, right? But also from the outside looking in, it looks like he's prioritized community and play within that community.
Mm-hmm. I released a second episode with Andy, and we talked about that exact thing.
Yeah.
I have been looking forward to this because I know from everything I've heard over the years about you from Andy, and then what I've known from you just in the couple of times that we've talked prior to today, I think there's going to be a lot of meaningful things. I'm looking forward to whatever meaningful things come from our conversation. Yeah. Let me just ask you, because I always ask our guests this question, what do you, Jason, really want out of our conversation?
Connection.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Any sense of what you'd want that to look like?
You know what it's like when you fall into a conversation that is meaningful. Everything starts humming, and you're on holy ground, and you lose track of time. And
right,
I'm always hunting for that meaningfulness, and connection, and hopefully to learn something or to deepen my understanding in something is always good. How about you?
When you said the phrase "losing track of time," it really it connected with me because one of my biggest struggles is staying present in moments and not thinking about what's next or what needs to happen. And I'm right now, what I'm wanting is to not be looking to my left at the little recorder and the clock on it. I'm trusting that if you need to go, you'll tell me. And I just really want to stay fully immersed in the conversation we're going to have. And it's also occurring to me, Jason, probably in a couple minutes, you and I will have been talking longer than we did at Andy's backyard. So this will be like the longest conversation you and I have ever had. And it's already, to me, been pretty meaningful. And so I can't wait for what else is coming. Can I talk nicely about you for a couple of minutes, and then we can find other things to get curious about? How are you when other people say nice things to your face?
I'm getting better about it. Another interesting thing that I learned from Andy, like that he put language to, is he was playing at some retreat, participating in it, but also playing. And so he got up and he played the songs, and he walks off stage and everyone's like, "Oh, that was so great." And he had to say, "Thank you." But there's something about when you do that, it makes me feel other. It makes me feel separate from everybody. And I don't think I want that. They're like, "Oh, yeah, I understand." So then when he played again, he got done and he walked off, and nobody did any of this per his request. And then he was like, "Well, shoot, I don't like that either. That feels weird." I think there's just a natural discomfort. I think about C.S. Lewis, how he said, and I can't remember where he said it, but the big idea was that true humility is being able to be as happy for yourself and for your accomplishments as you would for your friends. So I'm learning.
Love it.
So yeah, I want to hear what you're going to say.
Okay. So first time I heard your name was at a recovery meeting. The person facilitating the meeting, to kick off the discussion, because it was about like identity and how addiction is not our identity. It's just something that we identify as our struggle. He played the music video for Remind Me Who I Am.
Tell me once again who I am to you, who I am to you. Tell me lest I forget who I am to you, that I belong to you.
And so that was a couple of years into my recovery. Yeah, just watching and listening to that, it was so specifically encouraging to where I and a lot of the other guys in the meeting were, because that's not, when you first either confess or get exposed and realize like, I need to be in a room like this. It's such a humbling thing. And the default is not to think of how, treasured you are by Jesus, even though that's true. And so to have a reminder like that was really, really cool. So that was my first introduction to you and to your music. And then the second was just how I got to know more about you was when my friendship with Andy started 10 years ago. And I realized how many songs the two of you have co-written. And I think I've told you this, but every time we have one of our Roots Retreat men's intensives, Andy sings Why You Brought Me Here. And that song, probably more than any other, has been like the theme song of my recovery. Just the way that you guys wrote those lyrics.
Though it hurts to be this broken, it's bearable somehow, as the chance to prove I'm worthy disappears. I always heard you loved me, but I think I know it now. Is that the reason why you brought me here? I guess I'm grateful that you brought me here.
That means a lot. That was one of our first songs we wrote with each other, and I've always loved it so much. I need to do like updated version of that song.
We'll be right back.
How have things gotten so out of control? How did something that didn't seem like such a big deal at first completely take over? Porn and sex addiction are destroying your life and killing your relationships. You know you can't keep going on like this, keeping secrets and telling lies. Something has to change. But how? Most men who struggle with unwanted or addictive sexual behavior have tried to fix it on their own. But sex addiction is powerful and complicated. Recovery is possible, but it isn't easy. It requires us to focus on more than just behavior. It requires us to look at our whole lives and the parts of our stories that contribute to addiction. If you're ready to find freedom, maybe it's time for you to get to the roots. The Roots Retreat is a 4-day therapeutic and spiritual intensive. You'll work with therapists and coaches who specialize in sex addiction and recovery. You'll learn how to take healthy ownership of your behavior. You'll discover how your life experiences set the stage for addiction to develop. You'll see how God factors into your struggle, and you'll learn effective tools for ongoing recovery after the retreat. If you're ready to stop trying what doesn't work, if you're ready to experience real hope, healing, and change, let's get to the roots.
Visit awakenrecovery.com/Roots Retreat or click the Roots Retreat link in show notes. When people come up and talk to you at your concerts about the songs that were the most deeply meaningful, are they usually the ones that were the singles, or are they the ones that were kind of more the deep cuts that just stuck with them, or is it some of both?
It's some of both. Singles, I suppose the idea I had when I was growing up is that if a song was a hit single, that means it was one of the best songs, and that's why it became a hit,
Yeah.
And then just as I've gotten older, I've realized, no, a hit is usually lowest common denominator. It has to appeal to the most people, and
Kind of ticks all the boxes.
right, yeah, and rounds off the edges. I don't think that's always true, but most of the time it's true. I think of a hit song as like a McDonald's cheeseburger. It's a pretty good cheeseburger. I like a McDonald's cheeseburger, but it's not the best cheeseburger I've had. The best cheeseburger I had was at a little place about a mile from here called Subculture. You could squeeze 16 people in there at a time, and it was just a sublime cheeseburger. Now they aren't going to sell billions the way that McDonald's did, but McDonald's is like the hit song.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why you brought me here is more like a subculture burger, I should explain for anyone who's hearing this, who doesn't know this about me. You can hear that I have a speech handicap. It's not because Oliver's making me nervous, but
I'm a very intimidating person.
So,
and that's something that I have potentially for us to talk about. You've gone through a lot of suffering in your life, and you've talked a lot about it. And been really, really open. And so those are some of the things that if our conversation goes there, I'm kind of ready to ask you some questions about. But yeah, thanks for letting people know about that. I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question about that since you mentioned it. How much have you experienced people needing you to acknowledge that because they visually seem uncomfortable versus it's no big deal?
I think about what leadership looks like, and have you read The Wounded Healer? He speaks about how like the true spiritual leader has to go into the darkness first, and I remember hearing a guy speaking about communication many years ago, and he talked about how while he's speaking, if there's a distraction in the hall, everyone's going to be distracted until you go there with them, like, oh, wow, something's going on out there, right? Wow. So anyway, and if you go there with them and then you can bring them back, so my experience is that until I name it and demonstrate that I'm okay with it and I know you're okay with it, we're all okay with it. So let's keep going, then it gives clarity, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
It helps people know how they should think about it, Otherwise, are they feeling bad for me that, like that I'm struggling with this thing and that maybe I wish I could be more fluent, and so as it's happening that they're distracted by rooting for me or feeling bad for me, but like name it, then we can just move on. Yeah. It's interesting. Very often more inclined to stutter the more that I don't want to. So the first portion of a concert until I can speak about it. I'm more like, okay, don't stutter, don't stutter, don't stutter. Can make people uncomfortable, all that kind of stuff. But then as soon as I talk about it, then I don't worry about it as much anymore. And then it kind of goes away because I'm not worried about it happening anymore.
It's amazing the way the brain and the nervous system and the body work in such mysterious ways. Okay, before I was in recovery, I was a worship and music pastor, and that tends to come to an abrupt end when you get exposed in a years-long sexual addiction. But just in the people that I've had relationships with throughout that season of my life, and I've just continued to know a lot of people in music. I know a lot of songwriters. Honestly, it's always something I've been a little bit jealous about. But one thing I've noticed about my friends who write songs collaboratively is that they tend, when they talk about the process of writing with other people, often it seems like the song that is the outcome of those sessions isn't really what they talk about as the best part. A lot of times people talk about just the connection that they feel and the conversations that they have while writing that eventually leads to that song as the thing that mattered the most to them. I was just having a conversation about this with Andy recently, and I would love to get your take. Like, you've collaborated a lot as a songwriter. What has that been like? What's been the best part of that for you?
Yeah, well, when I write with Andy, it's a great example. And for anyone hearing this who hasn't heard Andy Gullahorn's music, which is a hard name to look up, even when the guy with a speech handicap isn't trying to pronounce it. Gullahorn, Andy Gullahorn. Go look up his music. It's very truthful. It gets to the heart of reality. It's fearless, and because of that, I'm often bringing him the most tender, exposed parts of my life, and saying, I need to get this out into a song. I'll arrive at his place like at 10 a.m. and we'll just kind of catch up for a couple hours, and we break to go eat tacos, and then come back, and the song usually spills out in about an hour and a half, And so I think of the songs as like artifacts of a meaningful conversation with my friend. And, so that's one way I think about it, and very often if I'm working with a newer writer, I walk in and I say, all right, what are we most afraid of talking about today? Because that's probably the song, Some people are willing to go there more than others, Andy's always willing to go there.
I just jotted something down I want to listen to again. What is it that I'm afraid of talking about that might be what we need to write about?
Yeah.
That feels pretty real.
Yeah, and what I'm aiming for is to try to write without armor, and to and to write a song that gives direct access to the heart, to the listener's heart, to my heart, to the heart of God, to the heart of reality. And it's surprisingly hard to do that, even if you're trying to do it. Like if it's too poetic, that gets in the way. If it's not poetic enough, that gets in the way. Sometimes my experience is that like a great melodic hook, for some reason, I feel like it's harder to write a meaningful lyric to a really hooky melody. I don't know why it's like that, So there are all kinds of barriers to getting to the heart of something.
I wonder if the really hooky melody is almost like that distracting noise outside that you were talking about earlier, that could maybe be so interesting that it pulls attention away from what you're really hoping the most that people keep with them.
Something like that, I think. Yeah. I love songcraft. I love like really crafted lyrics, but that can get in the way too, So Leonard Cohen, the great songwriter, he believed some songs ought to be like the altars that the ancient Israelites were commanded to make. They were commanded to make altars out of unhewn stone because apparently God didn't want smooth. He didn't want like crafted. He didn't want, And so how do you write those songs that are jagged around the edges still? I'm working on a book right now, and I have used AI. I don't use it to write the book for me, but I will use it like as an editor to assess, are these ideas clear, and is my grammar right, and formatting and all that, And every once in a while, like it'll spit out a suggestion for how I might reword things. And that can be useful also to kind of help you to see a different way that it could go, but I want to be careful to not lean on it too much, And so you have to develop a recognition of what is valuable about that and prioritize imperfection in your work, I guess, as a feature rather than a bug, right? Does that make sense? Am I making sense in all that?
It does to me.
So when I hear the perfectly crafted country song or even, Christian song where it's like, man, it's so, the crafting is so, it doesn't move me. Like it doesn't feel human enough or something, So I'm learning to value the imperfections as one of the things that keeps our heart open when we're listening to music.
Yeah, I mean, you've used the word imperfection several times, and Brené Brown refers to imperfections as gifts, and they really are. There's a uniqueness in the experiences that we have when we are more worried about being authentic than perfect.
Yeah. I think of David Byrne of the Talking Heads. He was interviewed, and the question was, you don't have a very good singing voice. Why are you a singer? And his answer was, well, my experience is that the better a person sings, the harder it is to believe them. And I believe Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash in a way that I don't believe Celine Dion. I'm not knocking Celine Dion. I believe them like in a different way, a deeper way, I think, So
if somebody comes up to you at the end of one of your shows and says, Jason, I believed you. Is that a compliment?
Yeah. Like, I know, right?
Well, hey, we've been talking about Andy a lot. People who've been listening to this episode know that we actually kicked it off by, we always have a little preamble at the beginning. Yeah. This time it was Andy. I got on with Andy and just had him talk about you a little bit, knowing that you and I were going to have this conversation. He said you have a lot in common. He says one thing that we don't have in common is Jason's really smart and I'm not so much. He said that you just very naturally go very deep, very quickly. Another word that he used to describe you was brave. It kind of gets, I think, to what you said when you go in to meet with him, and there's catch up and there's not catch up, there's catching up. And the thing that you're maybe afraid of is the thing that maybe you need to write about. I think that's what he was probably talking about when he described you as brave.
Yeah.
If it's okay, I was going to see if we could take a few minutes just to talk about some of the things in your life that have invited you to be brave.
Yes.
I'm thinking about two things that you've been so open about just over the years to talk about. Is I make up two of the hardest things you ever walked through. And one was when you were in first grade and your dad left. And then the other one was 10 or 11 years ago when your marriage ended, both of which you wrote about in a song called Worth Staying For.
I spoke without a stutter through the middle of first grade until my little world came apart. When I overheard my father saying that he just couldn't stay, and my speech broke the same day as my heart. They wondered if I did it for attention, but I think I couldn't get the question out. Wasn't I worth staying for? Wasn't I worth staying for? I still see him at the door. Was an hour worth staying for?
That was the onset of the speech impediment that you've already been referring to. People accuse you of just using it to get attention. You write about that. You've spoken about the breakup of your marriage. And then you and I, at Andy's house, were talking about just the more current struggle, which is just watching your son be very, very sick.
Yeah.
I look at some people and what they've walked through, and it just feels like too much.
Oh, thank you for your care for me. I will say, like, I don't think I'm particularly brave. I also don't feel like I've gone through more than the average person, like I don't think I have it worse than anybody else or have gone through anything worse. I think I might be more sensitive than other people, and so I do talk about it more, but I don't think I've had it any worse than anybody else. I do think, I think very early on, as I began to be aware of what I believe was a calling on my life, and I had this weird speech handicap, I'm like, well, okay, well, how's that supposed to work, And of course, if I step out in faith and I do this anyway, then the Lord will make it go away, right? And that will be my testimony, that when you step out in faith, the Lord meets you there and gives you what you need to do what He's called you to do. Okay, great. Let's go, And I was part of a very hyper charismatic religious culture at the time. When I'd step out and I'd still stutter, it had to mean that I wasn't believing hard enough, or there was sin in my life, or I was getting something wrong, And so then I would just try harder, and so I was on this shame and try harder treadmill for many years. I remember a night I was playing at a local coffee shop called the Coffee Hag, and I stuttered horribly that night and walked off the stage in humiliation, and all I wanted to do was hide, go home, and I'm packing up my things, and I notice a line of people forming to speak with me. I'm like, oh, okay, and I turn to meet them, and one after the other, I just hear the same thing, which is, thank you for doing what you did, because it reminds me that I'm not defined by my limitations either. And I remember realizing that, it wasn't the songs I sang, it wasn't the stories I shared. It was just the fact that I was broken, and I got up there and I did it anyway. That's what ministered to people. That's what accomplished something, And that was the beginning of me understanding that I believe that God wanted to use me, not in spite of my weaknesses, but because of them. And I suppose that got me in the habit of sharing openly about the struggles I've had, big and small,
I'm curious
Yes.
about something with that story you just told. That show that you felt so badly because your stutter was distracting, at least for you, and you saw the line forming.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember, did you feel like you wanted to talk to those people, or is it more like, oh, geez, I just want to get out of here?
It's funny that you had asked that, because I remember specifically my face felt hot because I felt very embarrassed. Now I got to talk with these people after I've just done this, humiliated myself publicly. And now to make it worse, I got to face individuals who just saw all of that happen,
Mm-hmm.
Then one after the other, that dis-ease melted away.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that because trying to put myself in your position, I think there would have been a part of me just saying, gosh, I just want to get the heck out of here. And
That's what I felt.
And to believe whatever the embarrassment was trying to tell me was true, and yet being willing to, here we go, and do more talking. The talking was the most uncomfortable part. And now these people are lining up, making me do more of it. And yet there's a gift it sounds like there was a gift for you that wouldn't have been there.
And it was a small coffee shop. Yes. So I just walked off the stage and was packing up my guitar and, trying to hurry so I could just put everybody out of our misery and just leave, so, and then I just, oh shoot, there's a line of people forming there. And I had a hard time looking them in the eye. But then with each person who spoke with me, just like all that anxiety and shame just kind of relaxed, and then I could receive this insight that I needed and that has shaped everything since. All that to say, I don't think that I've suffered necessarily more than anybody else, but I have found it to be a meaningful treasure trove to mine.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think, when you say, I don't think I've had any worse than anybody else, I've heard lots of people who have gone through really painful, traumatic things who have said that. Yeah. For me, I found that the better comparison isn't what I went through compared to what other people went through, but it's what did I go through compared to what I was created to go through, and the pain is just a reminder that I'm not in the place that I was made for yet. And so for it to be painful and for it to be excruciating, because I wasn't made for suffering like this. I wasn't made for relationships to end, but that's where I am right now. But another thing you said was, like in the coffee shop, when you felt like it didn't go well until you had those conversations, it wasn't the songs that was the most meaningful for those people. It was you struggling and them getting to be there for it. And it just really hits me that, like you said, the songs are what initiates the connection, but then what do you do once the people have picked up your music, have come to your show, and then they listen to that? I mean, that's the thing. There are some people who probably heard your story after they heard your music, but my bet would be a lot of people heard some story about what you've been through, and that's what drew them to your music.
Worth Staying For is so deeply personal. It's the most exposed song I've ever released. I was nervous about releasing it, actually. And for 8 years, I only had half of it done. There were a few times where I'd say, hey, do you guys want to hear a song that's not done yet? And I'd play it, and the response was so deep and meaningful. That was why I decided to finish the song. I have this memory of my dad walking out the door and my grandpa, because we lived at my grandparents' house, saying, I'll see you tonight. And my dad saying, no, you won't. I'm not coming back. I see him standing in the doorway saying that. And that seems implausible to me that conversation would have happened in that way. But I have that memory in my head, so I don't know. Did it happen in that way? Or did I compile certain memories because I was 5?
There's no doubt what the impact was.
And I just bring that up because I've found it's helpful for me to be suspicious of my narrative, but not in a way that invalidates the impact. Like you were saying, there's a lot of complexity to all of that. And for me, it's been helpful to keep as much complexity as I can. Verse 1, there's a lot of hurt. And then verse 2 begins with, we were married up in Washington. And I imagine that the listener's like, oh no, here it comes.
I can't take much more.
Oh no, this is about his marriage. Oh shoot. I can see where this is going and I don't know if I want to go there. I wonder if you experienced this in the catastrophe that you went through. If there is something about catastrophe that blasts away some of the blinders, I think my wife's extreme unhappiness that led her away from our marriage broke me out of a calcified way of thinking that all of a sudden I could see things that I couldn't see before,
Yeah, the way that I talk about things like that, I tend to think in silly analogies. And the one about what you've been describing is if I'm outside hammering planks into a deck and it's been late in the day, I'm tired and I'm kind of sleepy and my focus is drifting, there's nothing like smashing your thumb with a hammer to bring you to a point of instant clarity as to what's going on. Pain will do that like nothing else will do it.
I don't think I was a horrible husband. Like there's no like headline over our marriage that she left because of this or whatever. I was really trying to be a good husband. That meant a lot to me. But, I think there were just things I didn't see and needs of hers that I didn't recognize or have a capacity to see. But, when our marriage began to fall apart, and the pain of that did bring me very present to things that I just had not recognized before. And it's interesting because I think that pain transformed me. I think she would like who I've become because of how that woke me up to things I hadn't been able to see before. I think the failure of our marriage is maybe what our marriage needed the most. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
And that
which is not to say it's what you wanted.
No. The pain of all of that woke me up and helped me to see the ways that I was falling short. I can give a specific example. She liked to arrive at the airport 2 hours early before a flight. And I just, then you got to hang out at the airport for an hour is fine, right? I think that she was managing some anxiety that I didn't know how to recognize at the time. And getting to the airport early helped that for her. And I'm like, we don't have to get there 2 hours. And so no matter how much she asked for that, we'd always end up getting to the airport about an hour before, we're fine. And then as the marriage began to fall apart, that was one of the things that I recognized, like, oh shoot, I think she had some travel anxiety, and I could have loved her better. I could have just got us out the door sooner. Why didn't I do that? I think our marriage probably came apart because of 100 of those kinds of things.
I think about the clarity and the things that you've been able to hold on to, that you've received, that you've learned, that you've noticed, however's the best way of putting it, since the divorce. And I'm wanting to make sure to resist looking like I'm trying to paint a silver lining or put a bow on top of something that was horrific. But I think about one of the many, you said 100 things that contributed to the failure, and there's probably 100 more things that are redemptive or potentially redemptive that have come out of it since. And the one doesn't negate the other. I just know that from my perspective, the community that I'm a part of, and several men whose marriages haven't survived their addiction, have listened to some of the music that you've written since 2015 and songs like Honesty. They have felt, seen, and heard and understood.
If I told you I still trusted you, I'd honestly be lying through my teeth. But it's funny how it's always you I'm talking to when I say I don't believe. I tell you leave, but you won't go. I'm in so deep and I don't know what's going on. I gave you my heart, so tell me, why is it broken? If you're the healer, why are my wounds still open? What do you want from me? Are you sure you want everything? Even my honesty. Hallelujah, I'm going through hell. Hallelujah, hallelujah, I'm still singing.
I wish that you hadn't had to go through what you went through to write songs like that. And that's in one hand. And in the other hand is, but you did go through that. And it could have been just a part of your life that never made it into what you do as your calling or your career, but it did. And so both of those things happened. And so there's parts of it, I imagine, that still suck pretty hard.
Oh yeah.
And then also parts of it where there's some beauty that's come out of it. That can be really cool to be aware of the both and, but it can also be pretty confusing.
Yeah, I think being a songwriter gives you a pretty immediate outlet and application, or like a way to be a good steward of your pain, and like a very available application for making meaning out of it. I'm very fortunate in that way, but it's weird too, because you don't want to use your pain as a gimmick either, like as a oh, I've gone through this awful thing, I can't wait to write a song about it. Like, I don't think I do that.
Well, you say you're fortunate, and I don't argue with that, but also not to negate the part that you made choices as to how much you were going to show up for what came with those experiences. And I noticed another thing in the lyrics of Worth Staying For. You quote Richard Rohr in a sense, because he says pain that's not transformed will be transmitted. That was beautiful to me, just because I've heard it so many times in the context of what I do, and then looking at it with those two stories that you reflected on in verses 1 and 2. Yeah. You have to surrender to a process that really sucks a lot of the time in order to be transformed by pain.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in easy ways.
No. Richard Rohr says the two most reliable engines for transformation are great love or great suffering. Sometimes they team up. If I was going to speak about the pain that I experienced from my dad and from my ex-wife, I needed to aim that at myself too. I can't just throw other people under the bus, and you never want to be the hero or the victim of your own song. It took like 8 years, and in that 8 years, I tried to open myself up to love again. And early on, met somebody, and we were engaged, and we had a 3-year relationship, and we broke off the engagement, which in many ways was almost more painful than the divorce, I think, because the engagement felt like I have a second chance, and I've learned my lessons, and this isn't going to be like the last experience I had, And so when that engagement fell apart, I don't know, that it was very painful for me, at least. And then I had a few other relationships, and that didn't work out, and having to face the reality that I'm the common denominator of all my relationships that don't work out. I don't want to take too much responsibility for that. There's always two people involved, but I also don't want to not take enough responsibility. And so as I was being curious with myself about all that, what I was discovering was that it felt like each relationship, like I thought, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to love again. And then I'd get to the starting line, and when the gun would go off, I'd find that my ankles were still broken. I had to own that this whole thing is just very complicated, and that I had acted out on others what my dad and ex-wife had acted upon me, and I had to take responsibility for that. Pain will be transmitted if it doesn't get transformed. And I did have a moment where, like, all of the wounds I'd received and the wounds that I had handed out, I was just broken by it, devastated. And I had a long sleepless night where I just felt the weariness of all of it and just didn't want to be on planet Earth anymore, and came about as close as I ever have to taking an early exit, And I wrote, a week ago, I couldn't sleep. I was drowning in my shame. If I could have ended it, I would. But in the middle of that darkness, somehow I knew that God came and stayed with me until I understood, wasn't I worth staying for? What I'm grateful for in that song that we wrote is that I didn't bring that song to a premature conclusion with my earlier idea I had. And that by just waiting and paying attention to, I believe, the Holy Spirit, that and that sense that I don't think this song is done, that I waited until I'd lived enough life to get to a truer place.
Yeah. I'm glad that we took the time to just unpack that one song and how it kind of, weaves through a lot of the experience we've been talking about, because the song that's the McDonald's cheeseburger will sometimes make people lean in.
Yeah.
But what keeps people from instantly like being diverted to something else more interesting is when it's not pithy, it's not oversimplistic. When you hear enough to know the person who's writing about the hurt is someone who probably is still hurting and not getting an easy, cool song out of it, but like, this is my journal of my suffering right now. And I'm allowing you to share it. I think, Jason, it's a gift. I don't know if you've thought about it this way, but I think it's a gift that you share with other hurting people who find their way to your music, because it could be their journal entry too. It's just that some people like you have a way with words that many of us don't. And so rather than try to come up with the words, it's like, oh, that right there.
That's what songs do for me. If my song could do that for someone else, that's great.
Yeah. How's your son?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, he's been battling leukemia for about 5 years now. And he battled it once, I think 2018. He had his first, I lose track of time, but it almost took his life at that time. But he came back from the edge and went through all of his treatments, and he rang the bell, and we thought, oh, I think that's going to be the end of that, And then 2 years later, we're back dealing with it again. He started to get this black eye, and then it just kept swelling and swelling until it was about the size of a softball. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. And then they realized, oh, the leukemia is back, So he's going through treatments again, and it's hell on him, but it appears to be working. I did a little announcement about it, launched a GoFundMe campaign, and people were so generous. And so that has really helped him, because he hasn't been able to work while he's in the midst of that. So yeah, so much of my life is made possible by the kindness of strangers. And that's one more example. But he's in it. It's hard on him, but it's working.
I'm sure that people who are listening and maybe hearing about him for the first time, you're going to get more people praying for. Hey, you mentioned the book. Tell me what it's about and when we might be able to read it.
It's a book of devotional essays for all the songs I've ever released. It's taken me 4.5 years. I'm actually done with my part. I'm hoping I'll have it in hand by mid-June.
Very cool. Well, we'll make sure any links that you have for how people can find your music, eventually your book, anything else that will help them get to know you better, we'll put it in the show notes. What would make me really happy is if a lot more people know who you are and have connected to the music that you put out after listening to this conversation.
That's kind. I didn't get to ask you about the main thing that I wanted to ask
Addiction?
you about.
I got time.
I'll just put this idea out there now, and it's a big thing to open up here at the end, but it's been the main thing that's been on my mind for the last like 3 or 4 years. I'm sure you've heard of the shadow and doing shadow work, and Carl Jung's conceptualization of the shadow self, what I believe was Thomas Merton, he referred to it as the false self. The Apostle Paul talks about when he says, what's wrong with me? Why do I do what I don't want to do? And the things that I do want to do, I don't do that. He's speaking about the shadow. And my growing understanding of my shadow, the curiosity that I now understand it as the primary thing that I wish religious instruction would be speaking about. But I'd never received any instruction on it. And to me, it seems like it's the main thing. And I see it all over in scripture now. And it's like, why are we not talking about this? I was given a book like 25 years ago called Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert Johnson. And it's only like 150 pages long. And I lost it for like 20 years. And I found it again a few years ago, like, oh, I remember this book. And I'm so glad I lost it. Because if I would have read it 25 years ago, I would have thought, oh, yeah, I've read that book. I understood what it was talking about. But I did not have the capacity back then until I'd gone through all this brokenness and loss and failure and all of those things that expanded my capacity to be able to understand these ideas. So I'm so glad I lost the book. And I think I came upon it right on time, because when I read it, I was finally able to grasp the concepts. I believe anyway. But the idea is that, from the time we're born, we begin to get signals from the world around us about what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And we began to repress what's not acceptable so that we can get the love that we want in the world, and we start doing that from very early on. And so we repress these things, we exile them, and all those things that we exile become the shadow. So like anger, lust, pride to a certain degree, we're pressing it down, but it's still there and it can still operate upon us, right? A great example is that, like I can be very civilized and kind and reasonable and well-spoken until I lose it. I lose my temper. And then all of a sudden I'll punch a hole in the wall or something. And then I'll be like, whoa, where did that come from? And, a way to understand all that is that that's the shadow waiting for its opportunity to express itself. And that happened, with sexual behavior, especially, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say the idea that I absorbed from my religious instruction was that we deny those impulses and we reject them and we exile them. But as long as we do that, we are populating this part of ourselves called the shadow. And because we're not integrating them, we're never maturing them. We're never like growing them into obedience to Christ, right?
Yeah.
And so like one of the things in this book, it talks about how ironically, the people who are the most well-behaved often have the biggest shadows because they've learned to put more and more into that space.
Yeah.
Which is why we see a lot of religious leaders have moral failures. Whereas the idea in the book is that rather than exiling and rejecting these impulses, the key is to a certain degree, accept them and invite them out of the shadow into the light of God's love and grace and awareness, our own awareness, and accept that these are parts of ourselves without demonizing or shaming them, and then integrate them. And what's beautiful about that is that like anger, when it's integrated and grown up into maturity, then our anger becomes backbone and authority. Like integrated anger becomes all these good things. Integrated lust becomes passion, desire, and grown up and matured, right? And I just never heard a church talk to me about those things.
Yeah, I didn't either. But what you've been talking about the last several minutes, I mean, you're pumping our jet fuel. I mean, this is the work that we do. Something that you were saying, we learn the things that are socially acceptable and the things that aren't, and we learn how to suppress or how to put on a certain mask. And one of the things that we say at our intensives that we do is people will sacrifice authenticity for connection every time. We will step away from our true selves if we think that is what is required to get attention, attunement, connection, acceptance. And the thing is, the sad part is we start doing it when we're so young. And often it's because as young children, we are misreading the signs, because it's usually not the intention of our caregivers to communicate, you have to be somebody other than who you are in order to be acceptable. It could be, and the example I use is I've got a 4-year-old grandson, and when he was a toddler still, he was old enough to realize that he could do things that were funny, that we would laugh at. And so he would do these silly things and we would laugh, but the psychological makeup of a child will say, oh, you love me more when I do that, when I'm funny, than you do when I'm not funny. And we would say, oh, no, we love you the same. It's just that there are certain things that you do that are more enjoyable and other things that you do that we don't like as much. That doesn't compute to a child. And so when we get these messages for the first time, and some of them were direct, I mean, some of us grew up in places where don't be sad, don't get angry, don't cry, and it was more overt. But sometimes it was just the way people would react to us when we would do those things, when we would show those strong emotions. And we got the message, like, this is too much for you, and so I'm going to learn how to suppress them. But by suppressing them, we're not dissipating them. We're just, and one of the therapists, he calls it the beach ball effect, where it's like if you're at a swimming pool and you're holding an inflated beach ball under the water, that's the suppression. And we can do it for a while, but we can't do it forever. And then eventually the pressure of these unprocessed and unwelcomed feelings gets too much and it overpowers us. And when it comes out, it's like a bomb going off, and it's almost always in a massively destructive way in our lives. It'll come out like a rage incident, an addiction, a suicide attempt, all of these ways, because rather than letting those feelings come along with us for the ride, I know in John Eldridge's newest book, he talks about having those fragmented parts be allowed to heal and reintegrate themselves into the whole person. And this is, a lot of people who do work with IFS, internal family systems, motor therapy, it's kind of akin to what they talk about. It's these exiled parts of us that need to just know that it's okay for you to exist. You don't get to drive the car because you're young, you're immature, you don't know how to drive a car, but you get to be in the car. And so many of us have thought that those were unwelcome. They can't even be along for the ride. And so they come out sideways.
Yeah. And the thing that I might be being too black and white about this, but my own experience is that, as long as I demonized my desire and shamed it as lust, wrestled with pornography and other unhelpful expressions and outlets for that, I just would try to overcome that, but it was always kind of there under the surface. But once I just kind of relaxed and I accepted that this is a part of who I am, and that there's even a worship instinct associated with it, and I just stopped shaming it, and I welcomed it in and embraced it, and then matured it, grew it up, lovingly. I don't struggle with that.
Yeah. That's so important. I mean, for people, not only for people who are in addiction recovery, but really anybody to come to realize that disordered or distorted desires cause so many problems in our lives. And the problem isn't that desire exists. It's that in trying to suppress them, they go sideways. And, you mentioned some of them. I mean, anger is an emotion that we feel often because something that is happening is rubbing up against our image-bearing desire for justice. And so if I see an injustice in the world and I get angry, then I'm acting like Jesus. Because Jesus got angry at injustice, he was able to always channel his anger in helpful ways. And I don't always do that, but I can grow to be able to do it more, but not if I don't ever let anger be present. Like fear is an emotion that people aren't comfortable with, but fear is there because we have a hardwired desire to survive and to be safe.
Yeah.
And you know, sadness is a beautiful emotion because it says something that meant something to me has changed or has gone away. And if that's the case, why would I not want to be sad? You know, and just in my personal growth and in my recovery, I have learned how to stop using the phrase negative emotion because I don't believe there is such a thing. And there are unpleasant emotions, there are difficult, hard emotions, but none of them are negative because they're all connecting to something beautiful that's in the way that I was made.
Yeah. And you're ahead of me on all this, but my growing understanding is that in that space between stimulus and response, that like once shaming enters that it's counterproductive and usually creates the problem that
Absolutely
it wants to avoid.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I was listening to Richard Rohr speaking on a Brené Brown podcast. He said this thing. I was like, oh, that's what I've been struggling to understand. Like, why do I feel the sense that I have that the church is kind of missing it? He said, mainline Christianity didn't attack the ego, which is where self-righteousness comes from, right? Which I think is the mother of all sins, probably, with fear maybe underneath that, you know. But mainline Christianity didn't attack the ego, it attacked the shadow. So we learned how to hide our shadow. It's a cult of innocence. Now, when you spend all your time hiding the shadow, you end up with people who live in high levels of illusion. I thought, oh my gosh, that's it. You know, so much of my religious instruction, it didn't attack my ego. Oftentimes, it fed my ego in ways that I didn't recognize at the time. You know, through my willpower, my discipline to be holy, and you know, all these things. Instead, it attacked the shadow, which made me force it further into exile and grow my shadow into a monster that regularly overthrow me. You know, I'm working on a record right now about the church, and I've been looking for language like, how do I address that? You know, I'm working on it still, but I just wanted to wonder about that.
Can't wait.
I'm sure I got to let you go, but thank you for having me and being curious about my music and my life.
Well, thank you for allowing the curiosity. Thank you for being so open once again. Gosh, I feel like I know you so much better. An acquaintance has turned into a friendship.
Likewise.
Thanks for spending so much time with me, Jason.
Thanks, Greg.
We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, feedback, topics you'd like to hear us talk about on the show, click the Send Us a Message link in the show notes of any episode.